From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Happy Thursday, everyone. James Azar here for your CyberHub podcast Practitioner Brief on it's April 8th, 2021. Joining me, the lovely, the magnificent, my brother from another mother, the other James in every show we do together, James McQuiggan of KnowBe4. James, good morning.
Good morning, James. Glad to be here. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the show, man. Like, I feel like we don't do these often enough. No, we don't do these often.
Have to do them more often.
We do. We absolutely do. About a month ago, last time I saw James in person was at RSA.
Yeah.
And so my phone popped a memory about a month ago. And it was the picture that you and I took at RSA in front of the bookstore. And I was like, man, those days are soon to come.
Yes, so, they are.
All right, gang. Thanks so much for tuning in. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So make sure to subscribe, follow, and share the podcast. If you're listening on your favorite podcast listening platform, after the fact, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating that helps boost us up in the rankings here on the CyberHub podcast. We've got a really loaded show for you guys today. We're going to talk about how hackers are abusing Discord and Slack. And when we say hackers, we mean cyber criminals, not the kind we all like. So CyberScoop needs to kind of get their gear and vocabulary intact here, and we'll call them out on that here in just a moment. Lazarus Group in North Korea is back at doing their malicious cyber activities after a few years of quiet. A Cring ransomware is targeting Fortinet VPN devices, and a Supplier impersonation attack is causing havoc for over 3,000 organizations over the last several months. We'll get right into today's show. But before we do that, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, KnowBe4, Wistic, and Ativo Networks. KnowBe4 today has sent us a wonderful guest, James McQuiggan. So shout out to KnowBe4. You can find out more about them in the show notes as well. And James, I know you got a cup of coffee. I have mine. My master's cup today, folks.
Very nice.
Master's kicks off today.
Yeah.
Good for Georgia. And good for Augusta. So Augusta residents are all now in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So, my beautiful double espresso. All right, guys, you can comment below. We'll bring you on here as we go through this. Let's get right into today's one of our top stories today, where cyber criminals are actively using Slack and Discord to distribute malware to unsuspecting victims. This is according to the Cisco world-class Cisco Talus research group. I mean, Talus is unbelievably skilled. Suspected cyber. Now, see, they get it right. See, this is the thing. Why do hackers in the headline and use cyber criminals as the second word in your second paragraph when you use hackers in the first word of the...
It's because hackers is less characters in the headline, and so it's easier, I guess. I don't know.
How about just using criminals?
Criminals works too, yeah.
Right? And then you can put cyber criminals, right? Shannon, Vivara, we're calling you out, all right? If you guys know Shannon, tag her and let her know. Cyber criminals is the right terminology. But cyber criminals have been uploading files to these platforms, which are all then stored within the app's content delivery network, resulting in a link to malicious content. Attackers then share the links outside of Slack and Discord over email and or on other chat applications, for instance, allowing cyber criminals to share the link whenever they want. It's a kind of workaround that could allow cyber criminals, all right, we need to fix media. That could allow cyber criminals to meet targets where they already are on platforms they trust and need to conduct business, socialize, which could allow them to boost the success of any social engineering efforts. Let's talk a little bit about that, James. From a risk perspective, Discord, Slack, I mean, those are really commonly used applications in business.
Yeah, I mean, Slack is heavily used in a lot of organizations globally. Discord is, I know from a security standpoint, with a lot of security conferences, people are going to Discord. But a lot of that also, if you're opening it up to just anybody that can connect in, if you don't have some sort of gate, to kind of vet who they are coming in. But even if they do come in and they're dropping this malware in there, a lot of that also, for me, the risk of that is you're potentially damage your own system, a corporate an organization system. But also, again, at the same time, when we talk about phishing, with those emails, do you know the person that's sending it to you? Whatever they're posting, the technology aspect could kick in here and could sandbox it, verify, check to make sure, there isn't anything malicious in it. But, the cyber criminals have got all the same tools and toys as all the organizations do. So they're going to try it out on all their own equipment and see what bypasses. But essentially, if you're not familiar with the person and you're not expecting it, I wouldn't be opening that up. And if most likely they're doing a lot of enticement, depending on if it's like a gaming server, hey, here's the latest patch, or here's a way to get the latest mod, for this particular character, those kind of things, something that's going to entice the person to want to open that up. So just, you want to make sure you take a little bit of caution with regards to, where it's coming from and whether or not you know the person well enough.
Yeah. So Slack's been trying to institute some protections to prevent this. Saying that they're working on preventing phishing scams and spam. But again, if I impersonate you in Slack, very few people know. They don't see me. They don't know your writing style. I mean, how many people pay attention to writing style? Unless you're an editor. But I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, check this out. Is this you in this video? Those kind of things. I mean, that's on other social media that we're seeing that, and people are falling for it because it's that level of curiosity, that human behavior of like, ooh, I'm in this video, or what's in this mod or in this file, and they want to go check it out. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. This kind of falls into whose responsibility is it to mitigate this risk, right? And the mitigation here is twofold. Mm-hmm. It's on Slack and Discord to verify their users, but at the end of the game, at the end of the night, at the end of the day, their business is gaining users and getting more people on their platform. So they can't be logically expected to vet every person that comes on their platform. They won't, but I would say that whoever is organizing that server, the organization, they're the ones that want to vet and restrict that access. True. This does fall on us CISOs. Yeah. And this is another endpoint, especially now with, a year into COVID and work from home really being something that's here to stay. Yep. Right. So Slack and Discord are only going to be used more extensively as we go along, especially in the voice side. That's the one thing I will say. The nice thing I like about Discord is I start a voice room and everyone gets into the voice room, and now it's kind of like Clubhouse. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which works. Let's get into our second story. We don't want to get stuck here. Where Lazarus Group is the latest weapon strikes a South African freight company. This by Charlie Osborne for 0 Day. Talking about researchers have discovered a new backdoor that's been employed by the Lazarus hacking group in targeted attack against the freight industry. ESET said that the new backdoor malware, which they've dubbed Viviva, was traced in an attack against a South African freight logistics firms. While the initial attack vector for deploying the malware is not yet known, examining machines infected with the malware revealed strong links to the Lazarus Group. If you guys don't know who Lazarus is, they're kind of behind WannaCry, the $80 million Bangladeshi bank heist, attacks against South Korean supply chains, crypto theft. They're not behind the Sony 2014 hack. This is just, we know how that happened. That was an insider threat that sold the keys to the kingdom. Yeah. And it was at the time when Sony was releasing the movie with what's his name, Seth Rogen and James Franco. And James Franco about North Korean dictator, and they were the ones that paid the people who infiltrated Sony, and that's how they took credit for it. So this backdoor is able to exfiltrate file, gather data from an infected machine and its drives, remotely connect to a command and control server, and run arbitrary code. In addition, the backdoor uses a fake TLS connection for network communication, a component for connecting to its C2 via the Tor network, and command line execution chains employed by the APT in past campaigns. Talk a little bit about Lazarus kind of making a comeback, huh? Yeah, but the fact that they're targeting freight, they're going after transportation logistics. We're seeing a lot more, or I'm seeing a lot more of these attacks in the news in
in articles and things like of that nature. Specifically because, and I think when we look at the little incident in the Suez Canal a couple of weeks ago, that wasn't even cyber, but that stopped up a lot of supply chain for a lot of folks. Now you start looking at freight and logistics and their software and systems that they're using. And I know that they are working hard to make sure their systems are secure, but we're seeing them in the news just as much as anyone else with regards to the other industries like healthcare, education, energy, with regards to, being attacked, because with this supply chain, if they can go after the supply chain, then, that can hinder a lot more organizations, just like we saw with SolarWinds back in December. So a lot of that, with regards to the organizations, it's making sure that, you've got the patches up to date. And speaking of patches, here we go with another one. I'll let you take it from here. How's that for a segue?
So Fortinet VPN devices are now being hit with Cring ransomware. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, which is the vulnerability that's impacting the Fortinet VPNs is being exploited by a new human-operated ransomware strain known as Cring to breach and encrypt industrial sector companies' networks. This is significant because this is targeting industrial companies and not necessarily targeting anything else, which means that the attack and the ransomware is very specific. When they launch these ransomware attack, folks, they're really trying to generate money, and pure and simple. And by going after industrial companies, they're able to generate more money from those organizations quicker than they would from, let's say, a small business in Tampa, Florida. The Cring operators dropped customized Mimikatz samples, followed by the Cobalt strike after getting initial access, and deploy the ransomware payloads by downloading using the legitimate Windows Util certificate manager to bypass security software. Kaspersky revealed in a report that was published earlier today, that the attackers exploit Internet exposed FortiGate SSL VPN servers that are unpatched against, here's from when this CVE is from, folks, CVE 2018 13379er. 2018, it's a 3-year-old vulnerability, which allows them to breach their target's network. I know patching is hard, man, but but we kind of are setting ourselves up for this one. And
3-year-old
diagram of how this works.
Yep. Yeah. When you've got a 3-year-old patch that's out there, you're inviting the cyber criminals to come knocking on the door. And I get patching's hard. I came out of the energy industry, and but there has to be mitigation plans in place, and especially when it's a device that sits on the internet. Anything on that internet, that's got to be patched first. You've got to have plans to get those updated, even if you don't want to take them down. But it's that's your weakest link. You're basically leaving your front door unlocked and letting the bad guys in. Need to harden our distros. Yep.
Yeah, we do. Chris, you're absolutely right. We do need to harden our distros. I think there's this is not so much about Fortinet anymore as it is about those customers. But if I was Fortinet right now, I'd be picking up the phone to everyone who still hasn't patched this, and I'd be deploying a team as a courtesy to get this stuff patched, because this does more damage to Fortinet being a story still available 3 years later than it does for the victims of these ransomwares.
Yeah, and I think some of it also may come, you look at it from a business perspective as well, with regards to what are the service contracts like? What does it take to update? What is it? We got to upgrade to the latest version. We got to have the latest hardware. Well, the costs that get associated with that. And I know from, some of these industries, budgets are tight. They don't have the funds to do it, and they're running the risk, and that the risk management that they have, the decisions that are being made, is unfortunately now costing them. So.
That's absolutely true. Our final story for today, and this is where we'll wrap up, folks, is a supplier impersonation attack, which is posing a major risk. Out of a total of 3,000 monitored organization, Proofpoint reports that a whopping 98% were hit with a form of assault leveraging compromised supplier accounts and supplier impersonation. Proofpoint talks about leveraged compromised supplier domains to deliver a broad range of threats, including invoice fraud, phishing, aimed at credential harvesting, malware, and BEC. Of the observed attacks relying on the impersonated and compromised supplier, 74% leveraged social engineering for phishing or BEC, and less than 30% of them were malware related. That number, 74% social engineering for phishing or BEC, human element. James, how do we address that risk?
With social engineering, they're always going after the lures. Their curiosity, greed, fear, and they utilize those emotions to, get people to make those snap decisions and react. A lot of the time when you get an email and you feel you've got to react, take that moment just to stop and kind of think about it. And especially on these business email compromise, especially you're going to get an email from upper management and they want it now. So there's that strong sense of urgency, and you as an employee want to do that good job, but also at the same time, a little trust but verify goes a long way. If you can reach out to whoever's making the request, go, hey, is this something you're really asking for? And go from there. A lot of the time with these, you're going to find that they weren't really sending that email and it was false.
So this kind of starts a very interesting conversation. And I think, we've got a few minutes left on today's practitioner brief, but what we'll do is we'll address this kind of in a follow-up episode. Maybe we'll do something about this in Clubhouse over the weekend. But I think there's something very, very interesting. When we talk about phishing and business email compromise and social engineering, we often talk about the human element and the training aspect. And you're absolutely right. You can train them as so much. But here, what they're leveraging is what I think is the biggest challenge for organizations today. Your lower level supply chain vendors. So they're leveraging really that mid-sized company that maybe does 50 million, 20 million in revenue, 100 million in revenue. Those companies who may not have a robust cybersecurity program, they're leveraging them to go after those large enterprise businesses. And those large enterprise businesses, as far as they're concerned, right, their job isn't to verify changes. Their job is to get stuff done, unfortunately, sometimes. And I know that's a really bad mindset. And Chris brings up the idea of cyber risk quantification, show the impact, which, very true. But the idea of quantifying the risk here or the mitigation efforts of this, it's a lot more than training, right? Yeah. One of the things I think we need to be focused on today as CISOs, as practitioners, James, is working with our vendors about how do we educate them on recognizing when they've been compromised. Because at the end of the day, if they're a critical vendor to your supply chain and you're paying them a lot of money, right? Yep. So quantify your risk. Any vendor over 50 grand should maybe go through a cyber awareness training, yep. Right? That talks about how do you recognize all that kind of stuff. And you do it as a way to secure yourself, because if you don't do it, you're going to end up paying money to someone who's not them. And if that vendor is critical to you and they eat that loss, I've seen companies that have eaten that loss just to keep the business, but then they've had to lay off 2 people because of it. Yep, exactly. Yeah, when you're working with your vendors, especially on your smaller ones, if you're able to extend your training program out to them, or at least additional information to give them that education. But education also goes a little further, and you start looking, you've got your awareness, but then also your behaviors and your culture. It's kind of like your ABCs of security, where within your organization, you want to make sure the awareness is the starting point. What's really key is the behaviors and a strong security culture, because you're only as strong as your weakest vendor. It is, absolutely. Folks, that's it for our time today. James, thank you so much for coming on to Practitioner Brief. My pleasure. Folks, we'll be back on Monday, again, live at 9 a.m. right here on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and your favorite podcast listening platform. Yesterday, Monica Verma joined me on the CISO Talk podcast. Go there, check it out. An awesome episode. We talks about how she got started as a hacker to today. She's the CISO over at the Norwegian Directorate of Health, transitioning from the private to the government sector during a pandemic. A very, very cool discussion over how the CISO's role kind of changes when you go from government, from private sector to government. You don't want to miss that. That's the CISO Talk podcast. You can find it on YouTube or any of your favorite podcast listening platforms. And then Clubhouse. Go to the CISO Talk Clubhouse group. Join us there. We'll be going live tomorrow. I'll probably be doing another room on Sunday. We'll be picking up our Clubhouse activity as well. So tune in. Until then, folks, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for tuning in. Stay healthy. And most importantly, folks, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.